Okay, we're ready to go. Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. It's my pleasure to now introduce the Honourable Jim Reiter, Minister of Government Relations. Minister Reiter was first elected to the legislature in the 2007 provincial election. In 2009, Premier Bradwell appointed him Minister of Highways and Infrastructure and Minister responsible for the Saskatchewan Transportation Company. Minister Reiter was re-elected in 2011 and in May of last year was appointed as Minister of Government Relations and Minister responsible for First Nations, Métis, and Northern Affairs. Minister Reiter is a passionate advocate for urban governments, and SUMA always enjoys a strong working relationship with him. Delegates, please join me in showing SUMA's appreciation for our Minister, the Honourable Jim Reiter.
Thank you, Alan. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to speak to you here today. Before politics, Alan just gave you my background in politics. Before politics, I spent my entire career in the municipal sector. Now, I want to tell you, I enjoyed that work very, very much. And in fact, I was still enjoying it when I left. Probably the only thing I would have left municipal work for was politics. I've been kind of a political geek all my life, and when I had the opportunity, I didn't want to not take it. But you know, after 25 years, I guess it was, in the municipal world, as much as I did enjoy it, after that long, there's pros and cons with everything, and I think I was probably starting to get just a little bit tired of sort of hearing the same complaints, which essentially in the municipal world tend to be about high taxes and bad roads. So I decided it was time for a change and became Minister of Highways. I've had the good fortune to attend this convention a number of times over the years, first in my capacity in municipal work, as I mentioned, and then later as MLA and as Minister of Highways and Infrastructure. But this is my first opportunity to address this assembly since I was given the privilege of being appointed Minister of Government Relations, which of course includes being Minister responsible for municipal affairs. Now that's quite a thrill for a kid from small town Saskatchewan who spent his career in municipal work. It's not always like this in politics. To get an opportunity to speak to a huge crowd filled with dignitaries. As a politician, we speak to crowds of all sizes and very diverse crowds. Not that long ago, I was invited to Dinsmore in my constituency to speak to a seniors group. Now, I instantly agreed. I love going to those sorts of events. And then a week or two before I spoke, I was in the area and I noticed in a local publication that there was an ad that said, "Come hear our MLA, Jim Reiter, speak. Admission $2. This is true. Coffee and muffins will be provided. Now, apparently they were concerned that a very small admission fee still wouldn't be enough incentive to get people to come out to listen to me, so they felt they needed to sweeten the pot a little bit with coffee and muffins. So I went. It was a great time. I spoke to the group and took some questions, and they invited me to stay afterwards, so I was lined up for a cup of coffee, and I was speaking to a lady in front of me, and I couldn't help but overhear two elderly gentlemen right behind me who were talking kind of loudly. And I overheard the one gentleman say to the other, and it did my ego good to hear him say, "You know, that Reiter's a pretty good speaker." But my ego quickly deflated when I heard the other guy say, "Yeah, but he's kind of expensive." Now, I don't know what you paid for your convention registration fee, but I sure hope you're going to get some coffee and muffins included if you have to listen to me. I've spent my entire life in Saskatchewan, and when I look back at the time when I was starting out in my municipal career, many of my friends were leaving the province, usually for Alberta, because that's where the jobs were. It was that way for decades, but not anymore. In the last few years, things have changed dramatically in Saskatchewan. Now this is where people want to be. This morning you heard the Premier speak about why people are moving here. Not just our own kids moving back to the province, but people from all over the country, and in fact all over the world. People who are moving here because they consider this a land of great opportunity and their best hope for a bright future for themselves and for their families. Our government's plan for growth, which the Premier unveiled this past fall, charts a course for even greater economic growth and a further rise in overall population by 1.2 million people in the year 2020. That's something that would have been virtually unthinkable just a few short years ago. Those were years when people were leaving the province, not coming to it. More people, more business, and more industry leads to more opportunity. And that opportunity helps us to meet the true goal of growth, which is to improve the quality of life for all citizens of Saskatchewan. Now, granted, with that growth comes some challenges. And I want to talk to you about that today, specifically about three things. The first one, intermunicipal cooperation. Second one, infrastructure. And the third one, municipal finance, specifically the reassessment this year and revenue sharing, which I know you're all interested in. First on intermunicipal cooperation. The Twin Lakes Community Planning Association and Mid-Sask Municipal Alliance are just a couple of examples of municipalities that have banded together to plan and prepare for the greater good of their communities. In my own community of Rosetown, the town of Rosetown and the RM of St. Andrews recently announced the construction of a new medical clinic for our community. And I was just recently informed of a partnership between the town of Carrot River and the RM of Moose Range. Pasqua Trust is a municipal agency through which citizens can donate money to community projects. Tens of thousands of dollars have been raised in the last couple of years to help with community projects like new playground equipment, curling club renovations, and new medical equipment. There are so many great examples of cooperation amongst municipalities around our province. But sadly, that's not always the case. There have been some well-publicized situations lately where a city and an adjacent rural municipality have a strained relationship when it comes to regional planning. Our province can't afford that. After decades of being stagnant, we now have an opportunity to facilitate that growth and ensure that it continues. Opportunities like this don't come along all the time. We have a window here that we need to take advantage of. We need some form of regional planning around our cities. We would prefer that it be voluntary, but there are instances where that's not working. The population growth in our larger urban areas is made possible because of expanding industries that operate mines, extract oil and gas, and produce food on our farms in rural and sometimes remote areas of Saskatchewan. We see the impact of this translate into jobs and population growth and into the growth of corporate offices and service industries in our towns and cities. Cooperation and collaboration at both the provincial and municipal levels will be critical to sustaining and to responding to that growth. It's the role of our provincial government to ensure that that happens. When it comes to municipal infrastructure, more than $1 billion has been committed to projects in Saskatchewan over the past 5 years. That's funded by the federal, provincial, and municipal levels of government. With cost-shared federal-provincial funding, programs that are set to end in 2014, my provincial colleagues and I have been working with our federal counterparts to advocate for a new long-term infrastructure funding program. I've had the opportunity to meet with the Honourable Stephen Fletcher, Minister of State for Transport, on a number of occasions, and I've advocated for a new program. We need to see a long-term approach. We need to see a program for drinking water, wastewater, and transportation. Because of those discussions with Minister Fletcher and comments from Minister LaBelle, the Minister of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, I'm optimistic that these two ministers will be moving forward with a long-term infrastructure funding program for 2014. And I'm hopeful, very hopeful, that we will hear more from the federal government on this matter in the very near future. Also on infrastructure on the provincial side, you heard the Premier this morning talk about SAS builds. You can expect to hear more about that in the upcoming months, weeks and months on SAS builds. It will be a key part of our plan to meet the needs of our growing population. As everyone is aware, this is a reassessment year in our province, and assessments are up significantly. They're up an average of 67% across the board. Now that huge increase shows the strength of our economy. If you own property in Saskatchewan, chances are it's worth a lot more than it was just 4 short years ago. And we see that reflected in the new assessment numbers. As all of you are deliberating on your budgets, your municipal budgets, and making decisions on your own mill rates, provincial government will be doing the same. As part of the budget process, decisions will be made on mill rates for education property tax. While no decisions have been made, our government will attempt to mitigate increases as much as possible. And now for revenue sharing. For many years, the municipal revenue sharing pool was seriously underfunded. To address this issue, our government committed to tying the level of revenue to provincial revenue sources. It was decided at that time to simply tie it to 1 point on the PST. The result of this has been unprecedented levels of funding for municipalities in Saskatchewan. It's expected that municipal revenue sharing will be approximately $264 million with this upcoming budget. That's an 11% increase, and that follows an almost 10% increase last year. You heard the Premier speak to that this morning. And when comparing the upcoming budget with the 2007 fiscal year, the year we formed government, municipal revenue sharing will have increased by 108%. That's a level of funding that's the envy of municipal groups across the country. No other sector has received funding like this. Not third-party groups, not government ministries, not healthcare, not education, no one. I think we've clearly addressed the municipal underfunding issue, and then some. I know you're all interested in what will be happening in the upcoming fiscal year in revenue sharing in regards to the distribution of the pool amongst the 4 sectors. First, I'd like to give you a little bit of a recap on that. Starting early last year, an administrative review process was put underway. Now, when I became minister last May, a number of people in the municipal sector expressed concerns to me about the lack of progress on this process. With that in mind, I asked SUMA and SARM to meet to discuss the matter and see whether they could come up with some sort of consensus and a recommendation on how that pool should be distributed. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, so now we'll be making that decision. A couple of weeks ago, I met with officials from the 2 associations to hear their perspectives on it. The issue will now be part of the budget process, and a decision will be arrived at in the upcoming weeks. You can expect a decision that will be fair and equitable. And it's also important to remember that with the dramatic increase in funding in the pool, there will be no losers. Everyone will benefit. And just before I wrap up, I have one more item I'd like to talk to you about. Recently, a number of municipalities have contacted my office concerning base tax and minimum tax.